Hi, my name is Elesa, and I'm here today to speak to you about fake news. Over the next few minutes, you're going to be learning about how we are so easily seduced by fake news, about how it so readily engages us, and how we are 70% more likely to share fake news than real news. So why talk about it here at TEDxKlagenfurt? Why talk about it right here, right now? Well, I'll tell you why. Because we are in a historic election year. This year, 49% of the global population are eligible to vote in a national election. As such, we're seeing a tidal wave of fake news, and it's never been more important to understand how it is shaping the social and political realities around us. Now, I'm going to be sharing some interesting and hopefully entertaining insights from the world of writing. I'm a writer, so I write books about politics, fake news, science, finance, leadership, etc. And as such, facts are the tools of my trade. I believe that the truth needs to be protected and respected at all costs. However, I'm also a science fiction author, and I love to just engage in storytelling, to just use emotions and to connect with my audience on a purely emotional level. Now, I know that when you bring facts and emotions and storytelling together, you have some real magic. You have some real power there in your hands. And it's up to you if you want to use that power for good or for bad. Now, what is quite interesting is that when it comes down to fake news, what we're really looking at is a simple mix of politics and fiction. So you might not be surprised to know that we see a lot of classical fiction tropes or strategies always used in political fake news. And I'm going to share some of those with you today. The first is from one of my favorite movies, and it's a classic fictional construct that we see in politics and fiction, the hero and villain story. And where better place to start than with one of the greatest science fiction movies of all time, Star Wars. Do we have any Star Wars fans here? Yep. Wonderful film. So what we can see here, of course, is the classic good guy, the classic hero, Luke Skywalker. I absolutely love Star Wars. I'm such a fan. And it's such classic storytelling. Luke Skywalker, of course, is the light side of the Force. He represents everything that is good. He represents fighting and resistance against an oppressive regime. He represents goodness, hope, destiny. Then we have, of course, the ultimate villain, who is Darth Vader, and we see the Death Star looming on the horizon. That's a real reminder of the galactic empire of which Darth Vader is the face, which casts a shadow of oppression over Luke's home planet Tatooine and every other planet in the galaxy. Now, George Lucas, who was the writer and director of the original Star Wars films, knew back in 1977 what neuroscientists can only prove today with brain scans, and that is that stories and emotions engage us so much more powerfully than facts can do alone. So what does this look like in politics, this classic plot line? Well, these two guys. Now, for me, this is a really poignant picture. So I've been lecturing for a very long time. Since 2010, I've used this photo. This was back in the days before fake news online had made politics so vicious. I mean, it was never overly friendly, but it is vicious these days. And because of the polarization of the fictional constructs used in fake news online, this could never happen now. Back then, it was 2010, so Donald Trump had never even thought about entering politics, let alone the White House. And Joe Biden hadn't even entered the White House as VP for Barack Obama at this point. There was room for them to be friends, to laugh and share a joke. We're certainly not in that place now. But anyway, how does this hero and villain story play out in politics? Well, if we look at some scientific studies, it's really, really interesting. So if we have a hero story at the center of political post, we get really, really interested and engaged. It's what researchers call the Spectator Effect. If we see our hero win, but win big, crush the opposition, destroy the competition, an overdone version of reality, really, a fictional version of reality, then we're much more likely to engage in that post because this spectator effect, as researchers call it, increases our testosterone and makes us feel in command, in control, powerful, confident, and we keep coming back for more. If there's a villain in the story, the effect is even stronger. In fact, we are 67% more likely to engage with a fake news post if there's a villain at the heart of it. And if we can be made really, really angry, multiple, in fact, numerous physiological and political studies show us we are more likely to engage. So this is why fake news is always divisive. You've got to have a hero who is crushing somebody, or you've got to have a villain where the fictional interpretation of their personality is so overdone that you feel they are truly evil and threatening you. That's why fake news is always so dark. But before we go on any further, I want to make a little confession. So this is actually completely fake. Now, this is a deep fake. I haven't been using this since 2010, and it's completely fake news. In fact, what I did was I just created it to suit my narrative, which is what all fake news creators do. What I can tell you is that I actually created this last week, sitting at my kitchen table. It cost me 5 cents. It took me 30 seconds, and it was super easy to make. I'm not very technical, so I only ran into one tiny problem, which was logging onto the server that I needed to access this software. So I said to my 12-year-old son, hey, can you help me with this? Because I'm struggling. He said, sure, Mum, sure. 2 minutes later, he had me up and running, and he showed me how to use the prompt to create my first deepfake, which was this one. So that left me with a really sobering reality, that fake news of this quality is easy for somebody as non-technical as me to make, it's super cheap, really fast to create, and so easy that even a child can make one. But here's a question. Why am I the only fake news creator in the world to want to make a happy picture of politicians getting on and laughing and being friends? Well, we can look back to evolution for this. So our hunter-gatherer ancestors lived for around 2 million years in a really brutal, predator-filled, threat-filled environment. And as such, only those hunter-gatherers who were hyper, perhaps over-vigilant to threats actually survived. So what happens is that our brains developed a negativity bias to help us survive as a species. What is also interesting is that evolution designed us to be very receptive to stories, because of course we had the spoken word for hundreds of thousands and millions of years even, before we had the written word. And it's why our brains are still so receptive to stories, and that's why they're so neurologically powerful. But if I can just give you a very quick image of the human brain. So this is just a part of the human brain called the limbic system. It's very powerful, very primal, very ancient. I'm just showing you a little bit of it here. And what has happened, for example, with this negativity bias is if you see this small almond-shaped orange thing, that's the amygdala. We actually have 2 in our brains. And that has evolved over time to commit around 2/3 of its resources, that's the majority of its neurons, to just scan and cope with negative stimuli. That means all fake news drills down hard at that negative stimuli because it knows you're going to take far more notice of something dark and aggressive and threat-filled than anything nice. Now, the story gets even more interesting when we look at social media. One of the reasons that fake news travels so hard, so fast, and so deep these days is because of social media. There are a number of reasons for this, but one of the big reasons is 2 hormones in our bodies, one of which we can colloquially refer to as the love hormone, and the other as the reward hormone. So what happens if you see this guy here? I created all these images on AI in seconds as well. He's fiddling around on his smartphone, and he's writing a post, and he's getting super excited because he knows he's posting something emotional, interesting, engaging, and he's anticipating lots of happy reactions. That anticipation effect, studies show, increases that reward hormone, dopamine, in our brains. Then he posts it, and he does get those likes, and he does get those comments that are really positive. He gets more of that dopamine, he feels great, and it primes him to keep posting on social media. Then when he gets all of these nice positive comments and he sits back and reflects on how many people have approved of his post, he gets an increase in the love hormone, oxytocin, because it's a bonding hormone that makes us feel accepted by our social group. Now, this dopamine-oxytocin loop, when we post on social media, is part of the reason why we are 6 times more likely to share fake news if we are heavy social media users than if we are not, which is a sobering thought in itself. Something I just wanted to share as well, because we're here today. There's something really interesting that happens to us, which is also a part of evolutionary design. When we're at a big event like this, and we're all sharing in a common emotional experience, our bodies on a biological level have been designed to sync up. So right now, as I'm talking and you're listening, our heart rates are syncing, literally. Our brain waves are syncing, and we are literally arriving at the same wavelength. There's so much power in that kind of connection. You can imagine what somebody could do with that at a political rally, for good or for bad. So, what do we do with this information now that we have it? Well, the first thing that we can do is know that we have this negativity bias. We have it, and we know that fake news creators are constantly drilling down hard at it to get you to engage. Many studies show it's really damaging your mental health. Studies show that it can raise stress, it can cause anxiety, and in some people even cause PTSD-like symptoms. So one thing you can reflect on is how much you really want to engage with this kind of material, given that most of it isn't true anyway. The second thing we can do, on a lighter note, is to have a little bit of fun with it. So next time you open your social media app, you can see if you can go fake news strategy spotting. Is there a hero where the story of their winning, their big, big winning, is overdone? Is there a villain story where this villain, political villain, is super evil and it's making you super angry? If you see those signs, it's probably fake news of some kind. But the last thing I would say, and I think the most important, is that fake news creators only really want to engage you for 2 reasons. The first reason is to make money from you. The second reason is to have you help them spread disinformation. And if you would permit me to make one final Star Wars reference, I think that's a Darth Vader move, very much on the dark side of the Force, somewhere I certainly don't want to be. And perhaps that's a reason for us not to choose to engage at all. Thank you so much for listening. May the truth be with you.